All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We've got an absolutely wild story today about Moses and the Israelites. It's packed with massive miracles and, wait for it, tasty honey cakes falling right out of the sky. Imagine stepping into the scorching Egyptian desert. The sun is setting, the colors are just brilliant, and a huge adventure is kicking off. We're going to see exactly what happens when an entire nation is forced to learn how to trust.
Now, a lot of folks think the Israelites were just, aimlessly wandering around out there without a map. Like, were they really just lost in the sand for 40 whole years? Well, actually, no. This prolonged 40-year journey was actually a very carefully planned period of divine discipline. Why? Because the Israelites lacked the faith in God's ability to actually help them conquer the land of Canaan. Basically, they had to go to a giant desert school to learn how to trust.
Part 1. Hungry grumbles in the desert.
Just weeks after escaping Egypt, exactly on the 15th day of the second month to be precise, the whole community arrives at the shore desert. And, well, you can guess what happens next. Their tummies start to rumble, and when tummies rumble, attitudes absolutely crumble. They got so grumpy. I mean, they were complaining bitterly to Moses and Aaron, being super dramatic, crying out, "We wish Adonai had used his own hand to kill us off back in Egypt. At least there we sat around pots of boiling meat, eating as much as we wanted." They were literally accusing Moses of dragging them out there just to let them starve. Hunger completely blinded them to the fact that they used to be slaves.
Which brings us to a huge food for thought moment. See, complaining is actually a crisis of faith. Moses and Aaron had to break it to them that these grumbles weren't really against their leaders at all, but against God himself. He heard every single complaint. It's a massive lesson for us. When we're scared or hungry or just need something, we really should be expressing our needs through faithful prayer instead of bitter, angry complaining.
Moving on to Part 2. Tasty honey cakes from heaven.
So despite all this grumbling, God tells Moses he's going to do something totally mind-blowing. He says he will literally cause bread to rain down from heaven. And sure enough, the very next morning, after the dew evaporates, the desert floor is covered in this fine, flaky white substance. It kind of looked like glittering frost. The Israelites step out of their tents, look down, and they're just completely baffled. They point at it going, "Manhu," which literally translates to, "What is it?" And well, that exact question is how this miraculous food got the famous name, manna.
Moses tells them it's the bread God gave them to eat. But listen, this wasn't some dry, boring, crusty bread. No way. It was white like coriander seed, and it tasted exactly like delicious, tasty honey cakes. God didn't just give them basic fuel to survive, he gave them an absolute treat to keep them energized and happy out there in the desert.
All right, Part 3. Trust God, don't hoard food.
Now, getting these sweet treats came with a pretty specific test. And here's our next food for thought: embracing daily dependence. God gave a strict rule that everyone was only allowed to gather 1 day's ration. That's an omer, or about 2 quarts per person, just enough for 1 single day. Why do that? Well, to teach them the virtue of relying entirely on Him for their daily sustenance. He wanted them to trust that He'd show up again tomorrow, instead of getting anxious and hoarding food out of fear.
But of course, some people broke the rule. They let fear and greed take the wheel. They started panicking, thinking, what if there are no tasty honey cakes tomorrow? So they disobeyed and kept their leftovers overnight. And what happened? Oh, it was so gross. It bred these nasty, wiggly worms and just completely rotted. Moses was furious. It's a super clear lesson. Obedience requires trust. Failing to trust God's promises and acting out of fear and greed, yeah, that only leads to a stinky, rotten ruin.
Which leads us right into Part 4, the secret gift of rest.
See, God's rules weren't just about discipline, they were actually building up to a beautiful reward for the whole camp. From day 1 to day 5, the rule was strict. Gather your daily ration, nothing more. But then day 6 rolls around, and God completely flips the script. He commands them to gather twice as much, 2 whole omers per person. Why the sudden change? Because the 7th day was a holy Sabbath rest. He was providing 2 days' worth of food on Friday so they wouldn't have to lift a single finger on Saturday.
And that is our next big food for thought moral: the sacredness of rest. God commanded them to just stay put and rest. It teaches us that resting isn't being lazy. It's a holy ordinance. It's a sacred gift. Trusting God means we can actually hit pause, have a fun play day, spend time with family, and recharge, knowing He's already provided. We can rest without ever stressing about falling behind.
And here is the coolest miracle of the whole week. Step 1, you bake and boil what you need on day 6. Step 2, you set aside the leftovers for the Sabbath. Now remember what happened last time they saved leftovers. Gross worms, right? But step 3, they wake up on day 7, go to eat their fresh food, and 0 rot. Absolutely no worms. It stayed perfectly fresh. It just goes to show that when you follow God's plan, He takes care of literally all the details.
Okay, part 5. Lessons from the desert.
Let's quickly review these food for thought morals, because the desert was really just a giant classroom. Number 1, daily dependence on God. He provides exactly what we need, one day at a time. 2, trust beats fear and hoarding. Acting out of greed always leads to rotten results. 3, rest is a holy gift. God absolutely wants us to pause and recharge. And 4, pray faithfully, don't grumble. Swap those bitter complaints for trusting prayers, because God is always listening. God was so committed to teaching them this that He actually ordered Moses and Aaron to save a 2-quart jar of the manna as a permanent reminder for all future generations. And the craziest part? The Israelites kept eating these tasty honey cakes for 40 full years. For 4 whole decades of divine discipline, God faithfully provided their sweet daily bread right up until they finally learned the trust and faith needed to reach the borders of Canaan.
What an absolute roller coaster of an explainer. We've seen an incredible narrative of trust, divine discipline, and delicious daily provision raining right out of the sky. The manna shows us that faith isn't a one-time thing. It's something we practice every single day. So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. What will you choose to trust God with today? Will you let go of your worries and embrace the sweet blessings He has for you? Click the bell button, like, share, and subscribe. We'll catch you next time.